We're going to go about solving some more equations and reviewing how to do that. And this is your actual homework. So I'm going to work the odd problems and you're going to work the even problems for your homework and turn this in. So remember when you have fractions here, and these are sort of more, complex type fractions, but if we want to get rid of those fractions when we're solving so that we can get it down to an equation to be able to solve for the variable. And when we have something just this simple, one fraction equal to another fraction, then yes, you can just cross multiply on those. That makes it nice and easy. So 2x is equal to 1 times x minus 3 is just going to be x minus 3. And so let's solve for x. So x is -3. So that's a nice easy one. Okay, so when they get a little bit more complicated, remember we've got to make sure everything's factored so that we can come up with that common denominator. So x squared minus 16 factors into x plus 4, x minus 4. And what you're going to have to do here to get rid of these fractions is multiply every term by whatever that common denominator would be. So here our common denominator is x plus 4, x minus 4, because this term has an x minus 4. This term is just over 1, and so 1 multiplied by all that is still just x plus 4, x minus 4. So we're going to take each term here, and I'm going to list that denominator as x plus 4, x minus 4. And I'm going to multiply it by that x plus 4, x minus 4. And then I'm going to take the next term, which is plus 1, and multiply it times x plus 4, x minus 4, equals 2x over x minus 4. We're going to say times x plus 4, x minus 4. And just note all of those are always over 1, so they're just sort of like they're on the top there. Okay, so now let me go to a different color. Okay, so remember anything over itself is 1, and so this creates a 1, this creates a 1, leaving us with just 64. Now 1 times all of this, x plus 4, x minus 4, just leaves us with x plus 1, x plus 4, times x minus 4. Now here our x minus 4's will create a 1, so we're left with 2x times the x plus 4. So you see how we got rid of all those denominators when we multiplied through by that common denominator, and now we just have an equation that we need to go solve for. So we have 64 plus, if we multiply all this out, we're going to get that x squared minus 16 is equal to 2x squared plus 8x. All right, so we can still combine terms here, and that gives us 48 plus x squared is equal to 2x squared plus 8x. So hopefully you remember that if it's a quadratic equation, it has to equal 0 so that we can factor it and then solve for it. So I'm going to move everything over. I always usually move things over to where that x squared term is going to be positive because it's the easiest way to factor those. And so we're going to end up with 0 is equal to x squared plus 8x minus 48. So then we've got to factor this. What times what's negative 48? That adds up to be a positive 8. And that's going to be x plus 12 times x minus 4. And we remember that we set each of those factors equal to 0 in order to solve. So x is equal to negative 12 and x is equal to positive 4. Well, notice that positive 4 is an extraneous solution because x minus 4, and if x was 4, that would make that 0 on the denominator. So 4 cannot be one of your answers, so it's only x is equal to negative 12 would be your answer there. So we do have to watch for those extraneous solutions also. Okay, so the next one here is a square root problem. And remember, we are going to isolate the square or the root part first. Always isolate your problem and then go solve. So let's move that 4 over, and that gives us the square root of x minus 10 is equal to 4. And now remember that we have to bring both sides to the power of that root. So since that's a square root, we're going to square both sides, leaving us with just x minus 10 is equal to 4 squared, which is 16. And then we'll just add our 10 over to both sides, so x is 26. Okay, so a hint here on number 6, that's a cube root, so we're going to have to cube both sides of that equation. So make sure you do that. Okay, so here's another square root problem. We have to isolate that square root, which gives us the square root of 13x minus 29 is equal to x plus 1. Well, now we've isolated that root, so we need to bring it to that power, which is a square root. So we're going to square both sides. Remember, if we square x plus 1, that means x plus 1 times x plus 1, and you've got to multiply that whole thing out. So 13x minus 21 is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1 when that is all multiplied out. Again, this has to equal 0 in order to solve it. So we're going to move that 13x over. We're going to move that 29 over, giving us 0 is equal to x squared minus 11x plus 30. So now we've got to factor it. We're looking for factors of 30 that add up to be a negative 11. So that will be x minus 6, x minus 5. We set both of those factors equal to 0. So x is equal to 6, x is equal to 5. I think both of those work in our equation. So you always want to check those, but I think both of those do work. So they're both answers. Okay, so now we have an absolute value equation. And so remember, in order to remove those bars, we have to set up two equations. One equal to the positive answer and one equal to that negative answer. Because remember, in that absolute value, that can either be positive or negative inside here. Okay, so we're just going to solve both of those. So 3x is equal to 5. Divide both sides by 3. So x is 5/3. And we move our 2 over. And both of those answers also work. All right, so in this last two problems, we're just going to solve for a specified variable. Here we're solving for r. So remember, anything that's in the denominator, we can multiply both sides by that to get him out of the denominator. So rf is equal to mv squared. We're solving for r. So all we need to do is multiply both sides by f, leaving us with just the r over here, mv squared over f. Final answer. All right, so this one's a little bit trickier. Again, we've got these fractions with all these different things here. So that common denominator is 2xyz. So we want to multiply every term here by that 2xyz, and it's going to be just like we did before. Let me rewrite that so it's going to be just like we did before, where some of this stuff is going to cancel out or create a 1. So the 2x here over the 2x there, that creates a 1. So all we're left with is yz. Okay, now the y's here will cancel, so that gives us 2 times the 2xz. So 2 times 2 is 4xz. And then this is a z, so that z cancels with this z, leaving us with 1 times the 2xy. Okay, so now we're solving for the y. So let's get all of our y's over here together. So we've got 4xz is equal to 2xy minus yz. Well, remember, if we factor out that y from both terms, we get 2x minus z is equal to 4xz. And then we've created that y is multiplied times that whole term. So if I divide by that whole term, I'm going to leave that y over there by itself. So this leaves me with 4xz over 2x minus z is equal to y. Final answer. So hopefully you remember some of that and you're able to get through that homework.